Hello everyone, this video is part 1 of the two-part series on for and while loops in Python. In this first part, we'll go over on what is a loop, the different types of iteration, the while loop, the break statement, the continue statement, the pass statement, and the while else. Now what is a loop in programming? It is basically a sequence of instructions or a block of code that repeats or goes on until a certain condition is reached. It is something very basic, but it is very powerful. Now, in a loop, the loop will always ask you a question. If the answer requires an action, it is executed. That is, a loop is executed if the question is answered. And the same question is asked again and again till no further action is required. And each time the question is asked is called an iteration. Now, we'll break down about what this means. When we have a lot of tasks, a repetitive task to be done a number of times, then we use a loop. That is, sometimes you play a song in a loop, right? When it's stuck in your head, or when you like something, you play it on repeat, right? So that every time it repeats, it's called an iteration. So for example, you have to count from 1 to 10. So you have to count from 1, 2, 3, and so on. So this 2, 3 and going on is an iteration. And this is a repetitive task. So this is from 1 to 10, but you might have to count from 1 to a very large number. Or another application is that you have to send out an email reminder that rent payment is due to a lot of tenants. So this is a repetitive kind of task. So this is where the loop finds its application in. Now there are two different types of iterations. One is indefinite and one is definite. So when in indefinite iteration, we do not know in advance about the number of times the loop will be executed. So there is a condition which defines the number of times it gets executed. Like until and unless that condition is met, the loop will not be executed. And the moment it is met, it will keep on going until it no longer meets that condition. That is, it's like you repeat an alarm until the user presses stop. So the alarm keeps on beeping unless you press stop or snooze. The indefinite iteration is the number of times the designated block of code will be executed, and it is known beforehand, that it is known that this loop will run this many number of times. That is, you specify the number of times the alarm will run. So this is like automatic, you have put like a default 5 times the alarm will go on. So what is a while loop? It is the indefinite iteration, that is, it is not known beforehand about the number of times of the execution of the loop. That is, in this flow chart here, when you enter the loop, there is a condition which we are talking about. If it is true, then the body of the while loop will be executed, and the moment it is false, you exit the loop. Now, while you are thirsty, you drink water. So this is the condition, that you are thirsty, and this is the action of drinking water. Now, if you are thirsty, you take a sip of water. Then, if you feel thirsty again, you take another sip. So you see how this condition of being thirsty again is met, and then the action is performed again. And this action will be performed as long as you are thirsty. You will keep drinking water, right? So, and when you're not thirsty, you will come out of the loop. That is, you will stop drinking water. So the loop terminates then. So we can see a number of examples. Here we have an example of the while loop. We are trying to print the first 10 natural numbers. For that, we have taken a variable named I and given it a value of 1. Now in this while loop, we check while the value of I is less than or equals to 10, this code will execute. Now, right now I is 1, and which is less than 10. So print I, so 1 gets printed. Then the value of I is incremented. And that means that on the right hand side, the value of I gets added to by 1. So here it was 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2, which is stored on the I on the left hand side. Please remember the important concept that whatever is on the right hand side is being stored into the left-hand variable using the equal to operator. Now this I contains the left I contains the updated value and the right one contains the previous value. So 1 is less than 10, it prints 1. Then 1 plus 1 becomes 2. Now this condition gets checked again. Now 2 is less than or equal to 10, so it prints 2. Then 2 plus 1 on the right becomes 3. Now I is value stores the value 3. It again checks if 3 is less than 10. Following that, it goes up to 10 and prints the first 10 natural numbers. Here we have an example of the while loop wherein we want to print the sum of the first 10 natural numbers. For that, we have taken a variable I which starts with 1 and a variable called sum which will give us the final sum of the first 10 natural numbers. So we'll run the loop wherein we limit I up till 10 and there are two steps in this loop. Now the first one is there are some variable is updated with the previous value of sum plus I. Now what does this mean is that currently sum is 0 and I is 1. So 0 plus 1, the sum is 1 because we only have one natural number right now and that is the first one. Then we update I. Now 1 plus 1, I becomes 2. Now the while condition is checked again and what happened right here was one iteration. Now for the second iteration with i's value equal to 2, we check if this condition I less than 10 less than equal to 10 is still satisfying. Now 2 is surely less than or equal to 10 and we once again iterate over this loop. Now the previous value of sum was 1 because whatever is there on the right hand side gets stored on the left side. So here on the right we have the previous value. So sum was 1. Now I has become 2. So 1 plus 2 is 3. Now we have taken the sum of the first two natural numbers, that is 1 plus 2, and this sum becomes 3. Similarly, we update I and then it becomes 4 and the loop continues up till this value is not satisfied anymore. That is, when I becomes 11, this condition is false and the loop terminates. Upon termination, there is one statement. Now after the while loop, whatever is inside the loop gets executed if this condition is true, but any other statement after it will get executed by default. Now this here we are trying to print sum which will give us the final value of the first 10 natural numbers. Here in this example we are printing the first 10 natural numbers in reverse order now. So we take the value of I to be 10 and keep decrementing it here. Before that we try to print it. So 10 gets printed, then the value gets decremented. 10 minus 1 is 9 and 9 gets stored. This condition 9 greater than 0 is checked and it prints 9. Then similarly 9 minus 1, 8 gets stored, 8 is greater than 0 and it prints 8. Now this happens all the way until this condition is not satisfied, that is until I becomes minus 1, this loop will execute. In the loop, the statements are indented, indicating that they are a part of this while loop. This is the condition which is being checked. This is the i's value, which is the beginning value we give to I, and this is the incremental value. So this is initialization, this is incrementing the loop, and this is the condition being checked. And it is also responsible for the termination of the loop. The break statement. Now a break statement immediately terminates the loop. And why do we need it then? When you want to hastily come out of the loop or want to exit it before going over all the iterations, then the break statement is used. In the flowchart on the right, you can see that you enter the loop, and if a certain condition is true, then you break and you do not move, and the remaining body of the loop is skipped. So you just exit the loop in case of the break. Otherwise, the remaining body of the loop will execute. And if the test expression is false, then also you'll exit the loop. Now let's see an example. This is an example of how to use the break statement along with the while loop in Python. Now break is used when we want to exit a loop midway or when we want to come out of the loop hastily. So here we are trying to print the first 10 natural numbers beginning from 1 ending at 10, and we are incrementing the value of variable of var, which is a variable here, by 1 in every iteration. So this loop is incrementing by getting incremented by 1. Now the moment this var gets 5 value, it breaks. So what will happen is only numbers 1 to 4 get printed, because from 5 onwards we break out of the loop. So loop will run only for the first 4 iterations. Now this can also be thought of as an application in the real world. Suppose there is a vending machine and you're asking the user to enter the number of candies they want out of it. Now the number of candies will always be greater than 0. And suppose you need to always have 5 candies in the machine. It cannot be wholly empty. So if the user's requirement gets below 5, I mean it takes out so many candies that there are less than 5 values left, we don't want that, right? So we just break out of the loop that the moment it happens, because here we are the user is pulling out candies, so candies are getting decremented by 1. So upon execution, if we enter the number of candies to be 7, so it just prints 2 candies, because we always need to have 5 candies in the machine and only 2 candies can be retrieved from it. So that is how break is used. Continue statement in Python. So this statement terminates the current loop iteration. That is, a particular iteration is skipped. So what happens is that if you enter the loop and you test the expression of the loop, now if it is true and you go to the continue part, and if the continue is also true, then you go back to testing the expression of the loop. That is, you go on to the next iteration of the loop. This iteration just gets skipped. If the continue condition is not met, if the continue statement is not met, then the remaining body of the loop gets executed. And in the case that the expression of the loop itself is false, you just come out of the loop. Now here are a few examples that we'll be going over. This is an example of how to use continue statement in Python along with the while loop. Here we are trying to print the first 10 natural numbers, and on the 5th natural number we don't want it to get printed. So we use a continue statement. Let's see what happens on execution. So you see that from 1 to 10 all numbers are printed except for 5, because on 5 we say continue, that is, this iteration will be skipped. So that is what continue is for. If you want to skip a certain iteration, if you don't want a particular value to be presented or to be proceeded with, we can stop the execution in between just for that particular value. We can skip its turn by the statement continue. This is an example of how the continue statement is to be used with the while loop. Now this is going to be related to a real life thing. Suppose there is a machine which calculates the total amount of the items you have purchased, and there is a limit of only up to 3 items for now. So it will give you the total of the 3 purchases that you made. Now that is why the loop runs for 3 times. It begins at 1 and ends at 3. It is getting incremented by 1 in every iteration. In every iteration, it asks the user to enter the price of the item, and it is stored in the var variable. Now there is a sum variable whose initial value is 0, and this gets updated with whatever value the user puts in. Now instead of having like three different variables for the user to enter, we just have one variable, and it will store the most recently updated value, or it will store the most recent value that the user has input. We are adding it to the sum here, so this sum will keep a record. Now for example, I have entered a value of 10 here. So sum is 0 right now in the first iteration because of its initial value 0. So 0 plus 10 will be 10. So next time the user will enter a different price, right? So this 10 value will not be preserved. It will be overridden because of the reassignment of the variable. So next time suppose the user enters 20. So sum already has a running value of 10. Now this is the previous value of sum 10 and variable has the value 20. Now 20 plus 10 will be a sum of 30, and that's how the loop will proceed up to 3 iterations. The continue loop is there in the case that the user enters a negative price by mistake. So that iteration will be ignored. For instance, let's run it and see what happens. Suppose we enter a price of 10, then 20, and then 10. Now this is all positive numbers. So you see we entered a price 10, so it got stored here in var. Now var is greater than 10, so this condition does not satisfy, and we come here. Now sum is 0 initially. The right side contains 0 and var contains 10. So sum becomes 10. In the next iteration, we enter 20. Now variable var contains 20 because we override the previous value. Now this condition again is not satisfied and we come down here. Now here the previous value of 10 of sum was 10 and variable now holds a value of 20. So the total value becomes 30. In the next iteration, that is the last and the third iteration, we input our price to be 10. Now again this condition does not satisfy, and the original and the previous value of sum was 30 up till now. So 30 plus 10 is 40. Now I is 4 and it terminates because this condition is no longer satisfied, and we print out the sum after this while loop, the total sum. So that is the final value of the sum variable is 40. Now let's try and enter a negative value and see what happens. Suppose the first value is 10, but the next is minus 10, another is 20. So you see it skipped over this iteration. It did not add this. So only the positive ones were added. So 20 plus 10, only 30. So the loop inside ran only twice because the user entered a wrong value. Now let's move over to the pass statement in Python. It is basically a null statement. What do we mean by that? So nothing happens when the pass is executed. That is, if we have a loop, but we do not have the implementation yet, that is, we do not have any action related to a particular condition, but we know for sure that in the future we might have it. So we just want to have like the building blocks ready for now, and we'll work on them later. So, but you cannot like keep it hanging there. So you'll get an error. The Python interpreter will give you an error. So there's a pass statement which lets you get away with it. So you construct a body that does nothing. Let's see the implementation and we'll understand more. This is an example of how to use the pass statement with the while loop. Now here we have a variable which starts from 0 and it goes up till 9. So consider it as the numbers 0 to 9 on your dial pad, and you're dialing a helpline number, something like a customer care. And when you reach them, they give you options for like every number you press on the dial pad. There's a voice assistance which asks you to press 1 for like regular customers, press 2 for a different kind of customer, press 3 for certain rewards, and so on. So if you are that helpline and you don't have a functionality yet for the digit 5, then you can simply put a pass statement. Now here what happens is if x double equals to 5, there is a pass, else you just print all the numbers and you increment this loop by 1. So x is getting incremented by 1, and we see that all numbers are printed except for 5 because we don't have a functionality ready yet for that particular number. The else clause with the while loop. Now remember the else clause we saw earlier? It was with the if statement, but now it occurs with the while loop. Now Python allows an optional else at the end of while loop, and it is something unique to Python. So the else here behaves just like the if else statement. So but the difference is that it is a while loop, and earlier there was just one if statement. So when the while loop is finished, the else clause will be executed automatically. That is, here in this example, if we print numbers from 1 to 5, after we are done with this loop, this else part will get executed. Also, if there is a break statement, the loop will terminate prematurely and else will not be executed. Let's see the example, and this last example will mark the end of the first part. This is an example of how to use the else statement with the while loop in Python. Here we are trying to have a balance of $70 in our account, and suppose every month $20 are deducted for the electricity bill. So we need to always have a balance of greater than 20 or equal to 20 in our account. Only then we'll be able to pay the electricity bill. So here the balance is getting decremented by 20, which signifies that there's a monthly cut of $20. And in the case that our balance is less than 20 or goes below 20, then this while loop becomes false, and we will come to the else part and we'll get a warning of low balance. So you see, each month the balance goes from 70 to 50 to 30 and then low balance, because 30 minus 20 will be 10 and we need to have at least $20 in our account. Now in the case that we were not to have this else, like what is the use of this else? If it was not there, then after we come out of this while loop, we'll have to make a check that if our balance is less than 20, we'll print a warning. Please don't forget the indentation. So you see it's equivalent. But the else is just more convenient because we won't have to think up and write an if condition here. So it saves you this if check. This else will execute automatically once this while loop is false. In the case, you must also be thinking about what is the use of else with while, because we usually had that if else statement, right? So what is the difference between while else and if else? Now the if statement just checks a condition once, whereas this is a loop and this will go over iterations until this condition is false. So that is the difference. Rest, the else part functions just like the else in the if else statement. So after the while is false, or the if statement does not work or it's invalid, the else part gets executed. So it's the same here as well. Now in the case that there's a break statement and we have a balance of 100 now, we put in more money. So here let's see what happens. Here we're making a check that if the balance goes less than or equal to 20, we'll just break at that point. So when we have a break, then the else part does not get executed, because break just makes you come out of the loop. It ends the loop abruptly and you don't get this else.